Womanjika, or welcome to this evening's panel discussion on tackling today's global health challenges. I'm Professor Ross Vlahos, Associate Dean of Biomedical Sciences in the School of Health and Biomedical Sciences here at RMIT University. Before we kick off our discussion, I would like to acknowledge the people of the Wu Wurrung and the Bu Wurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. RMIT respectfully acknowledges their ancestors and elders, past and present, and emerging. And while we conduct our work remotely, I want to pay my respect to the wider unceded lands of this nation. Now, laboratory medicine and pharmaceutical sciences are integrated into the daily practice of just about every health clinician. Whether measuring cholesterol levels to determine a patient's risk of cardiovascular disease, or prescribing insulin to help a patient manage their blood glucose levels, our medical system simply wouldn't function without these two fields of health science. Without accurate diagnoses that enable the best possible treatment of illness and disease, or the development of safe and effective medications, health clinicians would not be able to perform their roles, as evidenced by our current COVID-19 pandemic. So, today we have assembled an expert panel of RMIT academics, researchers, students, and industry professionals to discuss how laboratory medicine and pharmaceutical sciences can help tackle some of today's biggest health challenges. So let's meet our fantastic panel. First of all, we have Associate Professor Tamara Paravicini.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tamara Paravicini, and I'm a pharmacologist by training. So pharmacology is the study of drugs and medications. Before moving into academia, I was a research scientist, mostly looking at identifying new potential therapies for cardiovascular diseases. I've been at RMIT for about 6 years now, and I'm currently the program manager for the pharmaceutical sciences programs.
Thank you, Tamara. Next, we have Dr. Rula Kiriakou.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Rula Kiriakou. I'm the program manager for laboratory medicine. I'm in the School of Health and Biomedical Sciences, and I teach pathology to multiple cohorts of students.
Thank you, Rula. Next, we have Miss Nadia Munsef.
Everyone, I'm Nadia. I finished my Bachelor in Pharmaceutical Science from RMIT last year, and this is my honors year, and it's a 1 year, 40 weeks placement. I'm almost more than half. I'm doing my placement in Australasian Leukemia and Lymphoma Group. It's in Melbourne. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadia. Next, we have Miss Miriam Rabbi.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariam Rabi. I'm a CRA manager at MedPace, a clinical research organization, and representing the industry panel today. And I was an ex-RMIT student, pharmaceutical science graduate. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Miriam. And last but not least, we have Mr. Tony O'Neill. Thank you, Tony. I saw some wonderful lip syncing there, but unfortunately you were on mute. So can you tell us all about it again? So,
I am so sorry.
Look, we try and liven things up a little at these Q&A sessions. So this is part of the fun that we're having tonight.
Yes, the joys of technology. Look, my apologies for that. My name's Tony O'Neill. I'm the Principal Scientist at Northern Pathology, Victoria. I have been working here only a relatively short period of time. Before that, I was in another similar role at Eastern Health. I worked in the pathology industry for quite a long time. My initial undergraduate studies were at RMIT doing laboratory medicine. So I have quite a range of experience and an interesting perspective on how laboratory medicine fits into not only public health, but the wider population.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tony. So before we get the ball rolling, there is some housekeeping. So what I'd like to do is to remind our viewers that we will have 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of our panel discussion to go over any questions from the audience. So can you please submit your questions at any time using the Q&A tool on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. So the way we've formulated this discussion is to have a series of questions that we're going to ask our panel of experts. So our first question is really about asking Rula, could you give your views or a brief overview of what the study of laboratory medicine is all about?
Yes, certainly. Yes, of course. Laboratory medicine is the science of pathology. Okay, it's all about detecting and diagnosing disease so that healthcare professionals can treat disease correctly. Okay, so now under the umbrella of laboratory medicine, there are 5 major specialty areas, and these are anatomical pathology, and that's where we diagnose diseases such as cancer. Then we've got clinical biochemistry, where we detect disorders of body chemistry, so disorders like diabetes. Okay, then we've got hematology. Hematology, here we detect blood and bone marrow abnormalities, so things like leukemias or hemophilias, etc. Then we've got transfusion and transplantation science. Here we test donated blood and blood products to make sure that they're safe and compatible for patient use. And then finally, the 5th one is medical microbiology. And of course, here we detect infectious disease. So the majority of decisions made by clinicians, including what medications they choose for treatment, are based on the results produced by medical scientists from these specialty areas. Oops.
Thank you, Rula. A nice overview there. Now, Tamara, how would you define pharmaceutical sciences?
Yeah, so pharmaceutical sciences is a really quite diverse industry. So I guess probably the best way to sum it up would be to describe pharmaceutical science as being the science and the business of developing new medications. So it's really all about developing medicines so that we improve our ability to treat disease. So where laboratory medicine is more on the diagnostic front and making clinical decisions, pharmaceutical sciences is kind of the next stage of that in terms of actually having the appropriate medications available to then treat whatever pathology has been diagnosed. So pharmaceutical scientists can work in all different aspects of the pharmaceutical industry. So everything from the early stages of drug development, where you're looking at identifying potential targets, synthesizing new drugs, and then moving into the really important phases of testing those drugs to make sure that they're going to be safe to use in a patient population and also that they're effective at treating disease.
Wonderful, Tamara. So this shows to me that the two, laboratory medicine and pharmaceutical sciences, are very interrelated and combined, that they can save lives by not only detecting disease and helping professionals treat patients correctly, but also providing the right medicines to treat the various disorders. So now the pharmaceutical industry is one of Australia's most innovative sectors. The industry employs many highly skilled workers, invests millions of dollars into research and development, and generates billions in revenue. Now, most importantly, this industry develops medicines and vaccines that Australians use to live longer, healthier, and more productive lives. But not every drug created by pharmaceutical companies makes it to the market. In fact, very few do. Only 9.6% of new drugs in development during the years 2006 to 2015 successfully made it onto our pharmacy shelves. So, Tamara, what are the different steps involved in developing a new drug?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. So the process of bringing a new medication to market is very long, very complex, and very expensive. So the estimates in terms of time and expense vary depending on which source you're looking at and which country you're looking at. But a general rule of thumb is that in order to bring a drug from the early stages of discovery through to being used to treat patients, you're looking at over $1 billion and over 10 years worth of work. So there's obviously a lot that's involved in bringing a drug to market. So you could consider the process of bringing a drug to market as consisting of a number of different phases. So the early stages are about the initial drug discovery and really that identification of particular targets. So what we mean by identification of targets is by studying a disease and then identifying if there's particular processes in that disease pathology. So it might be something that's happening in a particular cell or a particular organ or in a particular set of proteins. And then working out whether or not you think that targeting that particular cell or protein or whatever could potentially have a beneficial effect in either reducing or curing that disease. So that's really that early stage step, and that's the sort of thing that's done both in pharmaceutical companies, but also in association with medical research teams at things like universities, medical research institutes here in Australia, etc. Once targets have been developed, the next step is to identify potential drugs or chemicals that can interact with those targets. And that's a process that often involves quite a lot of screening of many hundreds or thousands of different types of compounds. Once that initial potential drug is identified, it then goes into the preclinical stage. So the preclinical stage is before it goes anywhere near patients, and it's where it involves testing to see whether or not that drug that you think might potentially have a beneficial therapeutic effect does actually help to treat that aspect of that particular disease. The next phase is probably one of the biggest and the most important, and certainly one of the dominant aspects of the industry here in Australia, and that is about clinical testing. So before a drug goes onto the market, it goes through a set of distinct phases in terms of clinical trials. And I think it's it's interesting to be talking about clinical trials at the moment, given the context of the COVID pandemic. I think I've seen more mentions of clinical trials in the media over the last 18 months than what I have in the last 20 years. So it's quite a relevant time to be talking about this. So drugs going through clinical trials go through a number of different phases. So they are initially tested for safety in a small population of patients, quite often healthy volunteers. They then the next phase involves testing the drug in a small number of patients with the particular disease that the drug is being designed to treat. And both of those phases usually involve small numbers of patients and are really closely monitored. The next phase is the big one, and that's where drugs are then rolled out to be tested in clinical trials involving large numbers of participants and often run over multiple different sites as well. Once a drug has been tested and made sure that it is effective in treating the disease as well as safe to use, that's when an application to use the drug can be put forward to the regulatory authority, which in Australia is our Therapeutic Goods Administration. And that approval is required before a drug can then be used for the treatment of patients. So just to give a bit of context to clinical trials in Australia, if you look at the numbers from 2019, the estimation is that the expenditure in clinical trials in Australia that year was a bit over $1 billion. The industry employed over 8,000 employees, and there were over 95,000 participants in clinical trials in Australia. And there are around 1,800 trials that started in 2019. So you can see it's quite a big industry, not just internationally, but also in Australia.
Okay, thank you, Tamara. Now, 30 years ago, the idea that leukemia could be cured would have been considered fanciful. Now, several types of leukemia can indeed be cured, and helpful treatment is available for almost all types. This remarkable transformation has come about largely because of studies carried out by clinical scientists throughout the world. Nadia, these were the words of Professor Ray Lowenthal, a haematologist at the Royal Hobart Hospital, when speaking about the important work done by your current organisation, the Australasian Leukemia and Lymphoma Group. You're doing your honours project with this group, so can you tell us about your research?
Yes. Tamara actually gave a very awesome introduction for my clinical trial part. So that helps me a lot. Australasian Leukemia and Lymphoma Group, ALLG, they are working actually mostly on blood cancer treatment and cure. And they are working mostly almost for 50 years. Their main target, of course, new treatment, but as Tamara just introduced, that it's a very expensive and longer process. So their one of their main focus is not just the new treatment, also cost effectiveness and how patients' life quality of their life. They started with leukemia and lymphoma mostly, but now bone marrow transplant, myeloid leukemia, everything is included in this 50 years project. So as a RMIT honors student, we join as a CTA, we call, that is clinical trial assistant in the company. And currently I'm working in 5 trials, all leukemia. My trials are all leukemia trials. Most of my most important job is when a patient is admitted in any hospitals and they are in our trial. That trial we are the sponsor actually. So the trials we are conducting, patients are in that. We receive their data, for example, the dose, how long they are taking the dose, everything we receive. It's a database that I maintain. I evaluate, I verify with this data with the protocol, because we have to strictly maintain the protocol. And these trials goes for 3 to 5 years. So it's a long process. And it's not just like how can I say, LLG also focus on patient-specific data. So, for example, a patient is a elderly person. Depending on those conditions, doses varies. So those are also included in the protocol, which are the main part. One of my main job is verifying those data and making sure that we are following these protocols. So currently, this is one of my big part. Another one is any progress. It can be an adverse event, it can be disease progression, or it can be a good side. Patient is improving. These ones, following up with the monitoring group, regulatory agencies, these are my most important job responsibility right now.
Excellent, Nadia. So how do you think your studies at RMIT University set you up to take on this role? What technical knowledge, what other skills did you acquire during your undergraduate years that set you up for this new position that you're in?
As this honors year is actually RMIT's honors year, so we go to the placement, RMIT actually fixes us with those. So of course, I didn't know the course structure when I started, but it is awesome that RMIT actually designed the program, and they know that the students are going for those placements, so they designed that way. So we are ready for those. We are ready for the organization. To give you an example, in the 3rd year, last year actually, we had artificial the place where we conducted our own clinical trial. So how to conduct a clinical trial, taking patients' consent, everything, every single step I had to do in an artificial environment, so that I actually knew the background or Australian rules and regulation. You have to follow everything. So when I went to my organization, when they say those names and say those things, I already know those things because I just did it. And also one of the course actually gave me a 6-hour training for good clinical practice. So I didn't have to go to training in my job. They said, oh, you already took this one. So RMIT program, this program actually they designed that way, that at the end of 3rd year, you're ready for the organization. And yeah, it was awesome. My employers were really surprised that, oh, I know these things. So it was really great.
That's excellent. Sounds like fantastic training during your undergraduate years is what it's all about and set you up for your position. So what do you think are the most rewarding and challenging aspects of transitioning from university to an industry-based project in the workplace?
Rewarding, I will say that the preparation we take. When you start a new job, you are nervous that you don't know a lot of things, but actually, RMIT gives you a lot of basic knowledge, so you won't feel you won't feel stupid. you will feel that okay, I know these things. This is not something that I just know right now. I'm just learning that right now. You know these things. That's the rewarding part. When you go to job, you feel like that. Yeah, I'm part of this industry. Challenging, I'll say. When you are in the uni, you have assignments. You have teachers are preparing for those. They're giving you notice. Your assignment due dates are coming. Everything is on plan, on routine. It's all scheduled. But when you go to job, no one is actually asking you, this is your due date. You are supposed to do those things. So suddenly, you are supposed to plan everything. And you are supposed to fix your due dates. You are supposed to do those things. This is the challenging part because it's kind of like in 2-3 weeks, we are supposed to do all the work the teachers used to do. That will be the most challenging part in job.
Thank you. So now this is a nice segue to Miriam. And now Tamara spoke about how clinical trials are really important step in drug development process. So as our industry expert, can you tell us a bit about how your organisation, MedPace, is involved in this step?
So MedPace is starting when the drug is ready, already demonstrated benefit and meet all the safety requirement. This is the time that we're going to test the drug in humans and starting the clinical trials and go through those different phases that Tamara mentioned. So companies like MedPace, they are contracted by research organization or universities or the drug companies to conduct those human portion of the drug testing before the drug is approved and is available in market for general population use and treating the disease. So MedPace is involved in conducting the clinical trials for all those phases that Tamara mentioned, from a healthy volunteer to end stages when we're testing the drug in thousands of patients.
So for students that want to get into this space, can you describe a typical day as a clinical research associate, and what are your key responsibilities and who do you interact with?
So one of the roles within MedPace which is highly in demand, and I believe it will be in demand for years to come, is a clinical research associate, or CRAs. One of the CRA job is they are responsible for patient safety, and I emphasize, and I think Tamara is emphasized as safety is the most important thing. So our job is to ensure patient safety while ensuring accurate data is collected to, at the end of the study, be able to establish drug safety and ensure it's treating the disease that we are investigating. So to achieve that one, I like to take you back to those glorious days pre-COVID when we could travel, and I'll tell you about my favorite days of work. So the days that start with catching a flight to, let's say, go to Adelaide, get to the hospital, meet a research nurse or meeting a study coordinator, someone like Nadia, have a quick chat about the patient before we settling down with our coffee and start reviewing the patient notes, reviewing all the data that is available for that specific patient, and again, making sure that there is no safety issue. After that, having a meeting with the specialist that treating the patient, and again, talk about the study updates, making sure there is no safety concern. Then again, pop to the pharmacy, check patient drug compliance and drug storage area, collect some more data, and then think about which fancy restaurant I want to go for dinner with my colleagues before I come back home. So that's a very typical day for a CRA job.
I'm sold. I think I might transition into a CRA position there, Miriam. So you mentioned safety and rigorous protocols that are in place. So is this one of the reasons that Australia is considered a great place to conduct clinical trials?
It is. That's one of the good reasons. One of the good reasons also is the fact that we have a very highly qualified and global expert researchers. Look at this panel right here, so many experts. And also we have great facilities and laboratories. This means we can run those clinical trials with the highest standard, which follows all global requirements.
Excellent.
Do you need more reason, or you're happy with that reason?
Oh, I'm happy with that, but if you've got more, please tell us another one or two.
I think I have another good one. You know, in Australia, we have a very diverse ethnicity. So just looking at this group, for example, we have all of us come from different background. Different background means different ethnicity, means different genetic makeup, which means drug may act and respond differently. So for a company to get the approval for their drug, they need to show that's enough evidence that this drug is safe and also benefiting that specific population. So guess what's happening? Running a clinical trial in Australia means we are capturing a lot of different ethnicities, means running the study in one country and you get the drug approved in several different countries. And majority of us speak English in Australia. So let me tell you that the translating document to the different language, it's very expensive. So this is, again, makes Australia very attractive to the drug companies.
Good.
I think I'll leave it here.
All good. Thank you so much. Now, the Peter Doherty Institute has been on the news a lot lately, given the recent pandemic. And it was, in fact, the first laboratory outside of China to successfully grow the coronavirus 19 from a patient sample, providing international laboratories with crucial information to help combat the virus. And across Australia, over 1.5 million COVID-19 tests were performed in the last 7 days alone. So this really is a great example of why medical laboratory scientists play such an important role in our healthcare system. So, Rula, can you explain how students of the Bachelor of Biomedical Sciences Laboratory Medicine here at RMIT gain work-ready skills and experiences?
Yes, of course. Yes, and of course, our medical scientists are working around the clock to process these COVID-19 tests. And of course, our laboratory medicine students are contributing to this important work because our bachelor program, our laboratory medicine bachelor program, includes semester-long or full-time clinical placements, okay, where, of course, the students go and work in a diagnostic pathology laboratory. Okay, so in a hospital pathology laboratory or a private pathology laboratory like Doherty or Melbourne Pathology or ACL, Australian Clinical Labs, and that will be either in Melbourne or regional Victoria. We also have strong partnerships in New South Wales and in South Australia, but domestic borders are now closed. So when we send our students on. So we have our clinical placements. Students get that work experience, that work integrated learning. And also we have site visits before they go to these clinical placements. So we have site visits in first year where they can go to Box Hill Hospital. Later on, they may do a visit at the Austin Hospital or Melbourne Pathology. We also have a visit there to Melbourne Pathology. So they can see all the aspects of a lab's operation, from specimen reception through to all the testing processes that we see in the specialty areas. So they get a sense of what goes on before they go on these clinical placements. And of course, we also have industry speakers that come and teach our students. We have industry members and teach in our practical classes, so that way we keep things current, and we make sure that the training of our students is all up to date. And we create videos for our students as well. We go out on a site in the laboratories, and we, in partnership with the laboratories, we create videos that we can show our, and we're teaching them and training them to then go on and work in the industry. So that's just some of the ways that they can gain work-ready skills and experiences during their study.
Excellent, Rula. So just to recap, so have students gained employment as a result of their work placements?
Yeah, so this is what I tell my students. I tell them that when they go out on placement, it's a very long job interview. So, and I think Tony will attest to this as well, that our graduates are pretty much very well sought after, because our degree is accredited by AIMS. Now, AIMS is the Australian Institute of Medical and Clinical Scientists. Okay, so, and it's the only undergraduate degree in Victoria that's accredited, okay, by AIMS. So, of course, the industry wants our graduates. So if they go to placement and they demonstrate that practical competency, you know, that they demonstrate practical competence, and they demonstrate good teamwork, they demonstrate professional responsibility, they demonstrate good communication, etc., then yes, after placement, they are definitely picked up by the employers for future work.
Great to hear that our graduates are work ready and a preferred source of employees. So, Tony, clinical laboratories represent an area of the healthcare that has undergone significant change due to the technological advancements over the last 2 decades. As the equipment has become more sophisticated and the number of different diagnostic tests available has increased, so too has the amount and complexity of the data produced. From what I believe, this has driven the emergence of bioinformatics. So can you please explain what bioinformatics is and the skill sets required to work in this field? Tony, again, is this part of the act? You're on mute.
I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Folks, can I just tell you that bioinformatics is the blending of biological data, information technology, and statistical analysis to understand health outcomes, with a view to improving these outcomes both in the present and in the future. And in fact, its use is very widespread. Things such as epidemiology, which is another word we've heard plenty of times this year when we've been trying to plan our way through COVID-19. But things such as disease progression, effective treatment, potentially cures, and also future healthcare planning, such as public health promotions, expansion of medical services into specific disciplines, etc. Now, in the area that I work in diagnostic pathology, our key goal is to try and understand what we can learn about an individual patient's health right now. And there has been, as Ross mentioned, a significant increase in testing in this particular part of healthcare over the journey. We now have instruments that are able to provide a wide range of tests on a single sample. And we can actually end up with an absolute explosion of data. So the question is, how do we handle this? How do we understand what the data means for an individual patient, perhaps for a group of patients with common issues such as, say, diabetes, or perhaps even for the wider population? Is there a message that we can learn from that? We also need to be able to make sense of that data that we are getting on individual patients and groups of patients. How do we interpret the data? What are the technical aspects of the testing that we need to consider to ensure that we're providing accurate information? What are the clinical implications of the results that we're providing to the doctors who are treating these patients? And also importantly, what to do next in terms of further testing, treatment which may be instituted, or monitoring of an ongoing patient. So bioinformatics is a growing area, and because it covers quite a range of disciplines, biological specialists, IT specialists, and mathematical specialists, there is many people involved in generating bioinformatic outcomes. So the skill sets required would very much depend on which part of the bioinformatics scale you're most interested in. Certainly, I'm interested in the biological data side of it, because that's what people working in pathology labs do. We produce test results that hopefully help patients to get good health outcomes.
So, Tony, given the explosion in the whole omics technology and bioinformatics in particular, and that bioinformatics has been integrated into laboratory medicine, is there still a need for laboratory medicine specialists? And what is the employment outlook for our graduates?
Well, look, certainly the need for pathology, I think, has never been more evident than what we have seen this year with the expansion in COVID testing. But COVID testing is only one very small part of what we do in the laboratories. We have 24/7 operation in a laboratory such as this because we are providing health care around the clock. So patients who are attending an emergency department, they may well have a disorder that can be diagnosed by a pathology test. And it's an often quoted fact that 70% of patients who attend a hospital will require some input from the pathology department to diagnose their situation and plot their treatment. So accordingly, there is scope for staff working in environments such as this. While there is substantial automation that's now present in laboratories, there is also always the need for scientists, technicians, lab assistants who know exactly what they are doing in this particular science, because we are consistently asked to perform an ever-reaching range of tests and to understand what those tests mean. So I think the future still remains very bright for graduates of courses that specialize in things such as pathology laboratory testing.
Thank you, Tony. So in saying that, as you alluded to what's on the horizon, so in your opinion, what's been some of the most exciting technological advances, and how is this moving us forward in the practice of health disease diagnosis and treatment?
Well, certainly, look, it's interesting that over the journey, I've seen instruments develop into bigger and more wide-reaching devices. So now, as I said, we can take one blood sample and we can probably run anywhere up to about 120 or 200 markers, depending on how many you wanted to run. It depends specifically, obviously, on what the doctor is requesting, but importantly, we have the capability to produce results in a very rapid time frame. And again, we've seen that with the COVID experience this year, where tests that, only 10 or 20 years ago would potentially have taken days to get a result for, we're now getting in a matter of hours. So I think the speed with which we can produce significant and important data, I think, is almost breathtaking. The other thing that is happening is there is an increased amount of automation, and the automation has been driven simply by the increase in samples that we're expected to handle. We have, in a laboratory such as this, anywhere up to 2,000 to 3,000 tubes of blood, for example, traveling through our laboratory every day, all getting different ranges of tests done. So to be able to handle not only the testing, but also the interpretation of the data produced from that testing, it does require significant automation and things such as artificial intelligence to help us get through that workload. But again, the key that brings it all together is the people who understand what they are doing in this particular science.
Okay, so Tony, you may have touched on this a little in your previous answers, but speaking of people and what they're doing, what qualities do you look for when you hire graduates?
Look, it's a great question, and it's something that I spend a lot of time dealing with. As Rula mentioned, we are one of the labs that does have students that come in for the laboratory medicine course. And I really encourage those students to be involved in the workplace that they're in. So we are after people that are resilient, because it is at times a difficult environment. It can be very confronting, some of the work we have to do in terms of the time of the day that you're doing it, and the volume of work and the urgency associated with it. But for people who find that a very positive way of spending their time, being helpful, being able to make a difference in people's lives, it can be incredibly rewarding as a career. So we are always looking for people that are interested in what they do, who can take be a positive member of the staff, and also have the right attitude towards what they are doing, because it is a matter of showing all of your capabilities and your skills and being able to use them for very positive outcomes for the patients who we're dealing with.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. So,
Thanks
Tamara.
very much. Thanks very much, Tony. It was great to hear about your perspectives from someone that's working just as immediately on the front line, but also for the vision for where LabMed is going at the moment. So I might just take over for a moment and take the opportunity to move the lens to our panel chair today, Professor Ross Blahoff. So Ross, you've got an interesting perspective on both laboratory medicine and pharmaceutical sciences through both your work as one of Australia's leading respiratory disease researchers, but also through your lived experience as well. And I was wondering if you could share some of that perspective with us today.
Absolutely. And Tam, look, I've even brought the tissues just in case I start crying, because the value of basic medical research has been enormous in my life. We often say that diagnosis and proper treatment of diseases can extend one's life or lead to an increased quality of life during that process. So I'd like to use this opportunity to go through a personal story that I endured back in 2007. So one morning I was there, I was shaving, and as I lifted the skin on my neck, I noticed a little node pop up. So I thought, being the inquisitive scientist that I am, I usually know that things like that could be bad news. So I went to my GP and said, look, I've noticed this node. What are we going to do about it? And he goes, well, first of all, we'll need to send you for a biopsy. First of all, we're going to do a fine needle aspirate. We're going to do an ultrasound. We're going to see whether it's a cyst, an enlarged lymph node. If it's a cyst, it's nothing to worry about. But if it's an enlarged lymph node, it could be something a bit more significant. So anyway, I had the fine needle aspirate on it. It came back negative, so I was quite relieved. But there was something still in the back of my mind. So the GP said, look, I'll send you to a surgeon just to cut it out, to do some histology on the specimen to give us an indication of whether we're dealing with anything. So I had the surgery to remove the node, went back for my checkup a week later, and the test results came back, and basically he said to me, Ross, there's an accumulation of plasma cells, and that was done based on some of the histological techniques and immunohistochemistry that our graduates learn. And then they also did some flow cytometry to look for discrete cell populations in the node, and they found that there was an aberrant clone of B cells. So he goes to me, Ross, I think you've got a lymphoma, so you need to go see an oncologist. So I did. I was then referred to a specialist at Royal Melbourne Hospital, who then did a little bit more testing, looking at the histological sections that the pathology place had done, did a few extra markers. And he said to me, Ross, look, it's an indolent B-cell lymphoma. We'll have to do some watchful waiting to see what happens. And the problem is, because it's slow growing, it usually doesn't respond well to treatments that we have at the moment. So I said, Dr. Grigg, that's great, but when things fire up, is that going to become the point of no return? And he said to me, look, don't stress, we'll deal with it if it happens. And of course, being the scientist that I am, I was on Google looking up all these things. I'd convinced myself that I'd be dead within a month, all sorts of dramatic, extreme circumstances. But anyway, then I went on a series of treatments, combination of dexamethasone and thalidomide for this particular lymphoma. About a year and a half later, things started firing up, as Dr. Grieg said. So my submandibular gland blew up, spleen started enlarging. So he said, look, we need to intervene with some chemotherapy. So, drugs that have gone through clinical testing, that have been in development for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So went into the hospital, started a 2-year chemotherapy protocol. It was an intense experience, and it was interesting because during that time I came across a number of graduates that actually trained at RMIT University. And when I had a PET CT scan, there was a graduate that put the line in, and so we got chatting about what we do and this and that. And I didn't tell him that I worked at RMIT. And I said to him, where did you train and what have you? And he said, RMIT University. I said, well, funny enough, I'm the Associate Dean there of Biomedical Sciences, and I'm glad that you had a wonderful experience. And to be honest, it's all about the service. The service I received was amazing. And I think we've really trained our graduates exceptionally to provide that level of care that's important to people that are undergoing these intensive therapeutic protocols. Also within that, there was standard conventional chemotherapeutic drugs, but then there was also drugs, immunotherapies that have been developed to target aberrant B-cell clones. So if it wasn't for the research that people in Australia, around the world do, that basic medical research, if it isn't for, laboratory medicine, pharmaceutical graduates doing the diagnostic testing to help determine what disease is, if it wasn't for pharmaceutical sciences having clinical trials, testing compounds in populations, etc., then who knows, maybe I wouldn't be here today. So it was all about early diagnosis, getting on with it, not being the male thinking, oh, I'm okay, and then it's too late. So my advice is to get on top of these things early. We're in the best country in the world. We have access to healthcare systems that others around the world don't. I know that if I had this particular condition and lived in Europe, for example, in Greece, my background is Greek, there's no way I would have got this level of care and pathological testing and all that sort of stuff. So who knows if I'd be here. So that's my personal journey, Tamara. And look, I'm glad I'm still around to tell the story, and hopefully for years to come. So what is it, 2007? What are we, 14, 15 years on now? So all is going well.
Thanks, Ross. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us today. I think that's a wonderful example of not just and a wonderful illustration of how great the Australian healthcare system can be, but I think it's also a really powerful indicator of the impact of where graduates from both laboratory medicine and pharmaceutical sciences can have, and not just what they're doing for the industry, but also the powerful impact of these different areas on individuals as well. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. So I believe we have a series of questions now in the Q&A function, which I will start going through. Our first question is to Tamara. I keep hearing about mRNA vaccines for COVID-19. Could you please explain what these are?
Okay, sure. So so I could easily take an hour for this, but I won't do that. I will try and keep it brief. Basically, the way vaccines work is that they are introducing something to the body to teach the immune system how to recognise it. And there's been different ways that vaccines have been developed and used over the years. So sometimes they're using inactive or less active versions of the actual pathogen or bug itself. Sometimes they're using a component of the infectious agent. mRNA vaccines are basically a different way of making a component of the particular infectious disease and then introducing that to the body to teach it how to recognise and respond to that particular virus.
Thank you, Tam. Another question to Rula or Tamara. Why do you think there are more women in biological sciences than in other STEM fields like engineering? Rula.
Well, I'll have a go. I guess I'll have a go. I think with the biological sciences, definitely there are more women. Not only in laboratory medicine, biomedical science, probably also pharm sci. I would say, Tamara. Would you agree? Yeah. Compared to engineering, where it's more maths based and more physics based, whereas the female students were more likely to do the biologies, and certainly for our degrees, you need one of biology or chemistry to enter into year one, and then you only need one of the general maths or the math methods or the specialist maths or physics. So with some of the other STEM programs, it's not as flexible to get in. It's a little bit more rigid with regards to what you have to do at year 12. And so we tend to have more females, I guess, entering the biological sciences, I would say, and the social sciences as well.
So, Rula, while I've got you here, I've got a question from a Year 12 graduate here that's asking, he or she is interested in a career in pathology.
Yeah.
So, as a Year 12 graduate, what's the best pathway to this career?
Okay, firstly, you've got to have the prerequisites to get in. And as I mentioned, to get into laboratory medicine, year one, you have to have units 3 and 4, pretty much a study score of at least 20 in one of biology or chemistry, and a study score of at least 20 in one of general maths or math methods, specialist maths or physics. But if you're in year 12 now and you don't have that, there is another pathway in, and that pathway is to go on and do the diploma of laboratory technology at RMIT. And once that's completed, you can enter year 2 of our degree. So that's an articulation pathway that we have. So even if you don't get the ATAR score, which is for us laboratory medicine, it's in the mid-70s usually, you can actually study that diploma and then articulate into second year. And so you have 8 subjects that will be exempted when you enter into second year. I hope that answers the question.
And one for you, Tamara. So there's a graduate here or a student that would like to work in clinical trials. Which degree at RMIT should I do?
Well, it probably won't surprise anybody that I say pharmaceutical sciences. So clinical trials is actually where the majority of our pharmaceutical sciences graduates end up. So you can see, as you've heard from Miriam and Nadia as well. So the bulk of our graduates do end up in clinical trials or in positions associated with supporting clinical trial research. And that's very much what our degree is targeted towards. So whilst you'll be studying all aspects of the drug development and drug discovery process, we do have quite a big focus in the final year of our degree in teaching you about clinical trials, regulations, etc.
So once graduates have acquired these skills, can scientists in these fields work overseas, Tamara and Rula?
Well, I'll go first and then Tamara maybe. I know with laboratory medicine, definitely, a lot of our graduates go over to the UK, remembering that our degree is AIMS accredited. So even though that doesn't mean anything for them over there in the UK, they know that that our graduates are very, very well trained, and they are actually quite sought after when they go there and they've got the working visa. So they pretty much can get work very easily when they're over there. But yes, definitely as medical scientists here, a lot of the international students come here and study and then go back home and get work and find work back home. So a lot of that happens as well within laboratory medicine.
Yeah, so pharmaceutical science graduates can definitely work overseas. There will obviously be some things that differ between different countries. So whilst a lot of the principles of good clinical trial practice, for example, and international standards will apply irrespective of what country you're in, individual countries will obviously have their own national standards and frameworks. So there might be a little bit of work involved in just making sure that people are up to date on the particular requirements of whatever country they're working within, but all of the general principles stay the same. I might just ask Mariam to just jump in there as well if she's got an additional comment.
I completely agree, and all of our students or graduate or the employees that have 1 or 2 years experience very easily can go to any English country and get a new job there. And we have several of them travel to UK or Ireland, or if they knew different languages, even in Germany or France, they are employed there.
Excellent. So what we're saying as well is that people don't necessarily have to stay in the one specialist area. There is mobility around. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left in the session, but so I'd really like to use this to ask Tony and then Miriam. So I'll start off with Tony. So Tony, you're a young, strapping man, but if you're any younger, what advice would you give your younger self if you're embarking on your university studies now?
Young as a long while ago, Ross. Look, interestingly enough, and I say this regularly because we do get a lot of young students coming through the department here, but I always say that what you are planning to study and where you are planning to work, you need to like what you're doing. You need to appreciate that what you're doing is important and is making a real difference. And, you know, there is nothing better than to be able to go home at the end of a working day or a working night, whatever it may be, to say, you know, today I made a difference. It might have only been to one life, it might have been to 20 lives or whatever. But to be able to say that, I think, is crucial. And that's why if you have a passion about what you do, the ability to achieve whatever you want is easily attainable. That passion comes through in the way people work. And, you know, we spoke about what sort of things we look for in graduates. That's one of the things I'm interested in, people that are interested.
Thank you, Tony. And Miriam?
I would say there is not only one pathway to a successful career. I think my dad wanted me to be a pharmacist, and still time to time say, are you going back to the university to study pharmacy? I said, Dad, I have a great career and I couldn't be happier than doing what I do. And on a daily basis, I can see what's effect I have in people's lives. When I see a patient that 35 years wasn't able to work for 35 years of his life, but because of this clinical trial and the drug that is provided to them, for the first time in his life, he had a job and working 9 to 5 jobs. So I know that I'm making a difference. And it goes back to what Tony said. If you like what you're doing and you're enjoying it, you always succeed in it.
Absolutely, I'd have to agree, and I think that's something that I always look for with my students that are interested in doing research. It's really having a passion for what you're doing, wanting to be at work when you wake up in the morning as opposed to staying home. So passion for me is the number one key. So Nadia, you've been lucky because you've had an opportunity to experience campus life for 2 years before COVID-19 pandemic and the transition to online learning. How would you describe your student experience?
Definitely, university experience was much, much, much better and fun. But when we started suddenly, RMIT actually took a lot of steps to make our life much easier. And I couldn't believe that it will go that smoothly. So things were really, my experience, of course, university experience was better, but I can't complain about the online ones. It was excellent. The exams, everything. I couldn't believe that it was possible, so I can't complain.
Good. And as part of that, did you join any student clubs or societies to add a bit of fun to your studies as well?
We already had our friend group of pharmaceutical science, so we continued that. It's a messenger chat, but we continue to do that, and we still have. So there are like 11 people there in that group, so not that bad. It's already a group.
Excellent, good. Well, unfortunately, this brings us to the close of this evening's event. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember to check out the other live sessions on our Open Day platform and register for the main online event on Sunday, August the 29th. We hope to welcome you to RMIT soon, and all the best for your future endeavours. Thank you and good night.